Happy Monday. You know what that means. It's time to talk about the box office with Mr. Dan Murrell. And Dan, it was a good weekend for dinos.
It was a great weekend for dinos. It was even a better weekend for dinos than a lot of the analysts thought on Friday night. Friday night, they were looking at the numbers saying like, well, I think this movie, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, is going to open at the lower end of expectations.
Would you say they stomped the expectations?
It stomped the expectations. Those early numbers went extinct, and it ended up just under $150 million. We've been talking about how it's been doing very well abroad, over $500 million internationally, $170 million from China, almost $50 million here in its North American debut. And the reason why it actually performed better than the analysts thought that they were going to do on Friday, the kids. 56% of all ticket buyers were 25 and under. That means families. That means kids. If you can tap into that market, particularly during the summer, you really have a lot of potential there. For contrast, Solo's opening weekend, just 18% was 25 and under. So that does show you how the young crowd drives box office. A lot of it is parents bringing their kids, families, teenagers, kids home from college, have, their days open, their weekends open, little disposable income.
Kids out of high school, too.
Yep, kids out of high
vacation.
School. So that really drove it up a little bit more than even the analysts thought it was going to go. And this summer is actually, it seems like the last few summers, the story's been like, wow, look at these disappointing numbers. This summer has actually been pretty good. As a matter of fact, with Incredibles 2 last weekend, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom this weekend, this is the only time ever that two movies have opened to $100 million or more on consecutive weekends that were not holidays. So not, Christmas, New Year's, that's usually obviously big blockbuster seasons, or July 4th, something like that. Two consecutive non-holiday weekends now have seen two $100 million plus debuts, and conventional wisdom has usually said that if one movie hits big, then that's going to impact the other one.
Sure, yeah.
We'll talk about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom's impact on Incredibles 2 in a minute, but it wasn't negative to Jurassic World. So Universal, very happy, obviously. Good opening, strong opening for their movie.
Good weekend for Uni. We talked about a lot in terms of the confluence of influence is on Solo's box office. What impacted it? Why was it lower than what we would have expected? But one of the things, notably here, is that I would bet younger people have more of a sense of attachment to Jurassic World, which was released just a couple of years ago, than Solo, which is a character certainly from the original trilogies, and then in The Force Awakens. But you know what else awakens? Universal openings.
Yeah, Universal Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the second best opening weekend ever in Universal Studios history, behind, of course, the first Jurassic World, Furious 7, Secret Life of Pets, Minions. A lot of their success recently has come on the strength of their kind of newly tapped strong franchises. The Minions, Despicable Me franchise, obviously the Fast and the Furious franchise. Secret Life of Pets will soon be a franchise, and which is good because Pacific Rim Uprising, which they teamed up with Legendary, did not do well earlier this season, so it's great for them to have a hit. But I was looking at, like I said, it's the second biggest opening of all time, obviously behind Jurassic World 3 years ago, which had the biggest opening weekend at that time ever, until it was replaced a few months later by Star Wars The Force Awakens. But I was looking at the movies that held that record, the record for biggest opening weekend of all time, and a lot of times there's different franchises that kind of hand it off. But what franchise do you think has held that record the most? So a movie from a franchise at one point that has held the biggest opening weekend of all time.
A movie from a franchise that has held the biggest.
So basically, obviously right now Avengers has had it twice. Infinity War was the biggest opening weekend of all time. Before that, at some point, Avengers was the big. So Avengers is now, that franchise has held the record for biggest opening weekend ever 2 times. What franchise do you think has held that record the most? I was surprised.
The most times.
Yes.
Okay. Give me a hint. Is it a superhero franchise? I don't think it is. It is a superhero franchise.
It is.
Oh, twist. Okay. Is it a live action?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know it'd be 20 questions.
Yeah.
I don't know how interesting the process is. But yes, it is live action.
Okay. Why don't you just tell me?
Batman.
Well, that makes sense.
Batman.
I would have guessed Batman, but Batman's too obvious to guess.
Batman Returns, Batman
Yeah.
Forever, and The Dark Knight have all held at one point the biggest opening weekend of all time record. That is more than Star Wars. That's more than the Avengers. That's more than.
See, this is why I don't do trivia.
Yeah.
This is what happens with trivia. It's the most obvious answer, and then you don't say it because you think that's too obvious. He wouldn't be asking me the question if it was that answer because it's way too obvious. And then that's the answer, and that's why I don't do trivia.
Summer of 19. These are the weird things that I love looking up at the box office too. Summer of 1989, that record was broken 3 times. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2, and Batman all set the record in 1989, which is like, that just goes to show you, records are made to be broken. Crazy year.
You know what you're pitching me right now?
What's that?
Is a movie about how 1989 was in fact the best year for movies.
One of them.
So it was a great year for movies. So
Yes.
would you say that the dinosaurs took a bite out of The Incredibles this weekend?
The dinosaurs did take a bite out of The Incredibles, and here's why. I mentioned that 56% of all ticket buyers for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom were under 25 years old. Guess what that matches?
I don't think that it's a good idea for you to ask me to guess things.
Fair enough.
I think we just learned that.
That is the exact number of ticket buyers for last week's Incredibles 2 massive debut that were also under 25. So Incredibles 2 banked $80 million this weekend. That's great, but it dropped 56%, which a lot of people are saying, like, that's kind of a big drop for a Pixar film. They usually drop less than 50%. Well, one explanation of that may be that if you look at the numbers, just statistically, they were going for the exact same crowd, the exact same audience. So because they showed up so much for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom this month, I think that led to a little bit more of a steeper decline for Incredibles 2 than maybe animation and Pixar have seen. However, it's already the 4th highest grossing Pixar film of all time domestically. It will easily surpass Inside Out and Toy Story 3, and it is now looking to dethrone Finding Dory as the highest grossing Pixar film here domestically. We'll see if it has that in its tank.
We have talked about what The Incredibles. I will confess myself that makes sense in terms of what audience it is drawing. I will confess myself a tad surprised. I'm curious to see Jurassic World's drop off or not next week, given sort of the separate natures of these. I find Incredibles to be a bit more rewatchable.
Yeah.
I find that.
And there's no substantial competition in the sense that there's no 4-quadrant tentpole blockbuster opening this weekend that's going to be a direct competition. We'll talk about the releases that are coming up this weekend. So
I don't think Jurassic World 2 is excellent for the really young ones.
No, not for the really young ones.
A little too scary.
We'll see what Incredibles 2 does in its 3rd week and what Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom does in its 2nd week. Ocean's 8, though, continuing to hold well, dropped less than 40%, crossed the $100 million mark in its 3rd week of release. Good news for that. That kind of keeps chugging, and that's what studios want in a summer blockbuster, because Ocean's 8 opened pretty well, but it's had staying power, and that's kind of one way to success. One way to success is to have a massive opening weekend and collect $350 million in 2 weeks, like Incredibles 2 has. However, another great thing, a way to make money in the summer, is to make a movie that opens well. And can sort of sustain in the top 5, like Deadpool 2 has done, which we'll talk about. A good opening, a strong opening. Deadpool 2 had a really good opening, but that has legs. That has that sustainability, and that can continue drawing in audiences, maybe not in massive droves every week, but enough to sort of like incrementally add to that box office figure. That's what Ocean's 8 is doing. And Tag, which we talked about last week.
I was just going to say, Tag is another one. And not surprisingly, we had sort of predicted that Tag would probably be one of those comedies.
Yeah, and a lot of it is gonna be how strong is it able to hold, because the opening was not what the studio would have wanted, but it only dropped 45% in its 2nd week. Its domestic total is now over $30 million, but that's about what its budget is. So Warner Brothers is going to want Tag to do what Ocean's 8 has done, what Book Club did, what a lot of other movies have done, which is to just stick around to make $10, $5, $7 million a weekend and just sort of add to its total. Like Deadpool 2, which is still in the top 5. It has outlasted Solo in the top 5. It has outlasted Infinity War in the top 5. It is still in the top 5. It crossed 2 milestones. It passed $300 million domestically, and it passed $700 million abroad, which puts it on another chart, which is all-time R-rated films worldwide.
Let's take a look at that
Let's
chart.
take a look at that. The first Deadpool is at the top of that chart, and the second Deadpool is about to be, as seems appropriate, right underneath it. It's got about $30 million left to pass Matrix Reloaded. It's already the number 3 highest grossing R-rated movie worldwide over it. And I pull numbers from a couple of different sources, and some of them have that number 5 spot as Logan. Some of them have that number 5 spot as Passion of the Christ. There are some differing counts on how much money exactly they both made, but I went Passion of the Christ. Logan is right behind that. But Deadpool 2 and Deadpool are going to be number 1 and number 2 on that chart very soon. And
There's some interesting conversations happening at Fox.
That is just a weird collection of movies.
It is a weird collection of movies, but what's great about that collection of movies, if you were to sub in Logan for Passion of the Christ, is I think it's demonstrative of what we've been talking about a lot in terms of the direction a lot of these brands should go, which is lower budget, a more interesting movie, take some risks, and you might find out that you reap very, very fruitful rewards from that, both creatively and in terms of the audience response and in terms of the box office. But if you don't, you haven't sort of bet the bank.
Yeah,
exactly. You haven't bet the farm on it. So that's actually, I hope, the conversations that are happening with Fox and or Fox Disney as that moves forward. A Wrinkle in Time actually did hit a significant mark this week, and a mystery was solved, Dan.
Yes, a mystery was solved. As you know, we had a couple mysteries last week. One of them was Wrinkle in Time, which had a massive boost, and I want to give a shout out to Tom Brueggemann at IndieWire. He wrote a great article about A Wrinkle in Time being programmed at drive-ins as a double feature. We talked about the possibility that it was a double feature. It was programmed at drive-ins as a double feature with Incredibles 2. That helped boost its gross last weekend. Now, we talked about how it came in under its estimates. Well, last Monday, it did enough to pass the $100 million mark officially, which now means that Ava DuVernay is the first Black female director to direct a movie that's crossed that $100 million domestic barrier. So that is a wonderful achievement for her and for Disney. It took a while to get A Wrinkle in Time over it, and certainly, the performance of the film overall, I think maybe they would have wanted it to do a little better, but that does not lessen the impact of that, and that is a great milestone and achievement for her and for Disney, and for society.
It's a wonderful achievement, and I'm glad that we were actually able to report on it accurately this week, and that we have unlocked one mystery. There was another that created quite a kerfuffle.
I don't know about that. I did want to mention, though, Won't You Be My Neighbor, which entered the top 10 as it continues its expansion, which is great. I made a graphic for that. No, JTE. Well, see, that's the wrong graphic.
No.
That's a graphic showing the rotten audience score for Gotti, which happened over the weekend. I'm sorry. Isn't it weird how that went from fresh to rotten in a week?
It's so fascinating.
JTE, come on. I'm sorry. I don't know how that
But what
happened.
we want to recommend is that you see Won't You Be My Neighbor, which is a completely soul-affirming, beautiful movie that will tell us how to handle the world in the digital age, because I think about how Mr. Rogers would have handled our era.
Yeah.
And he would have handled it calmly.
You can trust both the audience and the trolls behind the keyboard on Won't You Be My Neighbor. And
Exactly.
Go check that one out.
You can trust both of them. So let's talk about the worldwide box office and how the dinos are doing there.
I mean, the dinos are stomping up the charts. Let's take a look. Number 3, it was down, I think, at number 8 last week. It is now number 3 with its North American debut. It is steaming towards the billion with a B dollar mark. As I mentioned, big debut here in the U.S. It's doing very well in China. It had a big drop off in its second weekend, but that is par for the course in China for a movie to open huge and drop off 70-80%. That happens all the time. However, China is getting into its July is one of the months where they focus heavily on domestic, as you know, not what we call domestic, but Chinese films flooding into theaters. They actually have kind of an embargo for movies that are coming in. So we'll see how Jurassic World does as it sort of faces a lot of competition from Chinese films at the box office. Still, though, doing very well for Universal. Incredibles 2 in the top 10, as you saw. It bumped out Monster Hunt 2. It is now at number 8. It had a really good debut. It had the highest debut opening for a Pixar movie ever in China this past weekend. It actually had the highest opening ever for a Pixar movie in India. It's doing really well in some foreign markets. People are not quite expecting it to do as well in China as Coco did. There were a lot of cultural similarities with Coco and the Chinese culture that they thought really resonated with the Chinese culture. So they don't know if Incredibles 2 is going to do quite as well. However, Pixar is kind of hit or miss sometimes in the Chinese market. It had a strong opening for Pixar, and Solo, which you'll see is not on that list. I was looking at Solo. It's about $17 million away from jumping on that list. Given the competition, what's ahead of it, what's coming up, I think that it might have a shot. It might be able to muster enough money, energy to get into that number 10 spot. However, that's going to be a symbolic victory because it's going to be knocked off that chart very quickly, probably by a movie like Mission Impossible, something else that comes out this summer. So if Solo is able to muster out enough money to get that number 10 spot on the worldwide earnings chart, it's going to be knocked out soon. It would be purely sort of, I don't even know, perfunctory, like a participant's ribbon, almost
attendance award.
So we'll see if it can muster up enough light speed to get to number 10 before something.
I'm loving the rapid fire puns going on today. Yeah, no, I'm appreciating it. Incredibles 2. We can talk about that on the domestic box office. But one of the things that I'm noticing, we said initially like, oh, there wasn't a lot to talk about this weekend in terms of it's all about Jurassic World. However, what I'm noticing of the story that's being told is that there are, and I hope this continues to be the case, different models than the one that we've seen in terms of just massive blockbuster, massive money, or massive loss.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of different versions of those that we've seen this year. But if we look at something like Ocean's 8 and hopefully even Tag, because I think it's a fun, well-made comedy.
It's got some work to do, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, but even with Ocean's 8, you're looking at a little bit of a different model, budget, and then performance-wise, which I hope continues to be the case, so that we don't have this diametrically opposed world of so much spent that it becomes impossible to allow for so much creative freedom to an indie. So those are my thoughts on today. Let's talk about what's happening right here in the United States.
Incredibles 2, now the number 3 movie of 2018 here in the U.S., just below our two Marvels'. Fallen Kingdom jumps in at number 7. That's going to be cracking the top 5 in very short order. A Wrinkle in Time, we mentioned that it gets knocked off. It crossed that $100 million mark. It gets knocked off the list this week. But in better news, 50 Shades is also enjoying its last week on this top 10.
Bye.
Ocean's 8 should supplant it at the number 10 spot next week. But one chart where Ocean's 8 is already doing very well is the summer movie chart. Let's take a look at the summer movie report. Infinity War obviously still at number 1. Incredibles 2 jumps up to the 2 spot, knocking down Deadpool and Solo. Jurassic World drops in at the number 5 spot. We're starting to kind of see, I think, what that top 5 is going to look like roughly. I think it's starting to take form where Deadpool and Incredibles are, Solo's not going to be, I can't imagine, in that top 5, but it's starting to drop off. Ocean's 8, as you can see, at number 6. I really do think, looking at the schedule ahead, and how much juice it probably still has left at the box office, absent, maybe one or two very, very surprisingly big hits, I think Ocean's 8 has a very good chance at being on that top 10 list at the end of the summer.
What do we think about Ant-Man and the Wasp?
Ant-Man and the Wasp, I think, is definitely going to be on the list.
It's go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know where exactly. This is one of the few Marvel movies, like,
it's hard to say.
It's hard to say. I was pretty confident in saying what Black Panther and Infinity War would do, just given the hype and the marketing and the buzz around those movies.
But this one's a little difficult to say.
This one's difficult. I don't know how well it's going to do. I don't think it's going to do poorly. I just don't know what kind of breakout potential, or I think it's
particularly coming where it is sitting after Infinity War. It's going to be this one. I'm very interested to watch. We'll be seeing it tomorrow night. We will be reviewing it this coming Wednesday, so we'll have certainly a thought about how creatively successful it is in our estimation. But how well it does at the box office, I think that's a big mystery.
It is.
The most important chart of
the week. The most important chart that we have, of course, the countdown to the Meg.
The Meg.
Roth, we're about to break the 40-day mark.
Boy.
46 days until the Meg swims into our hearts.
I will have earned the Meg by the time it gets to us. And the reason is it's after Comic-Con.
That's right.
It is my after Comic-Con. You earned it. Treat yourself.
You're going to decompress
I'm
with the
going
Meg?
to decompress. I'm going to go to an ArcLight or wherever they let me have wine in the theater.
And drink all of it.
And drink all of it and enjoy the Megalodon.
It's a Megalodon.
And we are so much closer to a Meg Fast and Furious crossover as we have discussed.
This week, however, two diametrically opposed movies are the two wide releases here in North America. Sicario, Day of the Soldado, the sequel to Denis Villeneuve's Sicario, and Uncle Drew, starring a number of NBA basketball players.
Yeah.
And other various comedy personalities. I don't know much. I've seen the trailer for this. It's certainly what I would call it high concept. It's sort of like NBA players in old age makeup playing basketball. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm curious about it.
Well, I've seen Sicario, Day of the Soldado.
Yeah.
And that is not a cheerful movie.
Is anyone in old age makeup playing basketball?
There's no one. It's sadly, and I think that's the missing. That's the missing link that would have made that movie just sing.
Fake old people playing basketball.
Look, this is it's a heavy movie. It's coming on the tails of a fantastically well-made movie from Denis Villeneuve.
Yep.
It is, in my estimation, not as good as Sicario.
That's tough though. But Sicario was really good.
But that said, exactly your point. That said, Sicario is excellent. It's a really gorgeous movie, and so this is a good movie. It's not a bad movie at all. It's just unfortunately baked into this comparison with this other movie. It doesn't feel to me like all the kids under 25 and that are out of college summer movie.
We're not going to be breaking down like 65% of the audience is under 25.
We certainly aren't, but I'll be curious to see Uncle Drew.
Yeah, Uncle Drew. Well, Roth, next week, what we are going to do, since there's not a massive blockbuster opening this week, and it makes perfect sense, we will literally be a week from today. We'll be at the exact halfway point of the year. We'll be at July 1st. So next week, we're going to take a look at 2018 so far. What have been some of the hits? What have been some of the misses? Are there any fun, weird charting things to find? I'm going to look at that this weekend. And we'll talk about that next week, along with everything that happens at the box office this weekend.
All of the things at the box office and where we find ourselves in the year so far. You guys let us know what you think in the comments below. Will Uncle Drew be the surprise hit of the summer? No, it won't. But we are looking forward to the Meg. We will see you, and we are looking forward to seeing you next Monday. Talk about more box office things.
Always fun.
No more trivia for me, though.
Thanks for watching. Yeah, no more questions.